to talk a little bit about my fitness journey, particularly my weight gain and my muscle building journey. I really want to touch on a lot of the fitness mistakes that I made so that you can learn from my mistakes and learn a lot of the lessons that I've learned along the way and avoid the time that it takes to learn those lessons. Now, even if your goals are not the same as mine, even if you are on a weight loss goal instead of a weight gain goal, that is totally fine. A lot of these lessons will still apply to you. I started weightlifting when I was 21. I am now 29, so I've been at this for quite a while. Prior to starting weight training, I was a cheerleader, I was an equestrian, I did a lot of dance growing up, but I never really got into a weight room or experienced any level of weight training. In fact, I tended to avoid it. So when I was 21, I got really invested actually on YouTube. I started watching a lot of the fitness influencers that were kind of coming up at the time, thinking Nikki Blackadder, Christian Guzman, Heidi Sommers, all of those people were my inspiration. I binge watched all of those videos where they were prepping for bodybuilding competitions. So that was really what gave me the inspiration and motivated me to get into the gym and start weight training. Major reason that I wanted to make this video is that even though I learned a lot in watching those videos and in the years following my introduction to weight training, I really do feel like I didn't really figure things out until probably 4 or 5 years in was when I really started to see results. I really started to figure things out, and it got me to where I am today. I am a coach now. I have a fairly big platform on TikTok, and I also am on Instagram, and I am helping women figure out what it really takes to build muscle, what it really takes to see progress on your fitness journey, whether that's weight loss, whether that's building muscle, whether it's a little bit of both. I grew up on the thinner side. I have been very privileged in that I have always lived in a fairly small body, but I was ultimately very envious of people who were more curvy, of women who had some shape to them, because I am built like a wooden door. And so I spent so much of my adolescence cycling between wanting to make myself smaller, wanting to make my waist smaller, wanting to make my thighs smaller, and wanting to be curvy. And it was these contradicting emotions and contradicting feelings that made me never feel like I knew what I wanted to do with my body, or never made me feel really secure or confident in it. And my fitness journey, when I started weight training, it really helped me to feel like I could change the things that I wanted to change about my body while also feeling really good about it and feeling really confident, and eventually got me to a point where I didn't even really care as much about changing what my body looks like, as much as I care about feeling good, of being strong, and ultimately just having a balanced and healthy lifestyle. Though I still do follow a lot of bodybuilding practices, I still want to build my legs, I still want to build my upper body, I want to have really capped delts. Like, I still want to attain a lot of aesthetic goals. I do also incorporate a lot of focus on just general fitness, general strength, all of those aspects that make me feel really well-rounded instead of just focusing on appearance. What weight training gave me was the ability to build some curves and give myself a little bit of that muscular, more curvy body that I never thought I would have. And I'm never gonna be a Sofia Vergara, but at least it gave me a little bit of femininity, I guess you could say. So I went from being a very petite, I called myself a stick, and I don't want this to come off as any way insinuating that you shouldn't be comfortable with your body if that is what you look like. If you are a thin person, please embrace that. I do not wish this for anyone. I do not want anyone to feel like they should want to change how they look, but that was my mentality at the time. That was how I felt back then, was that I felt like a twig, and I wanted to be curvy, but I was also being subjected to the diet culture that was constantly telling women that we need to be smaller. So throughout the process of my fitness journey, I started at about 135 pounds, maybe 140 pounds. I increased weight by about probably 10 to 15. I think I got up to like 150, 155 was like my set point for a while. So I built a decent amount of muscle, but I wasn't drastically different. Nothing really significant changed. And then about, I think it was during COVID, was when I decided to go on a really full-blown, really intense bulk. I was eating over 3,000 calories a day. I wasn't really tracking though. I was kind of just eating whatever I could, just trying to put on as much mass as I possibly could and training throughout the course of that. This is also when I started to really figure out proper training. And so I put on about 25 pounds during that process. I got up to, I think 185 was my max weight. So I definitely put on a lot of mass. A lot of it was fat as well, but I did put on a lot of muscle mass. And from there, I think about a year ago was when I decided, okay, I'm gonna shred some of that off. So I did go into a deficit following that. I did lose about 15 pounds. I got down to 165 so that I was able to see a little bit of that muscle tone that I had built, a little bit of the progress that I had built. So I did go back down a little bit in weight, but over the course of my journey, I have started from, 135, maybe 140, increased all the way up to 185, and now I'm at about 170 after my most recent bulk. So now that you have a good idea of what my journey has looked like over the last few years, let's talk a little bit about the mistakes that I have made, because I have made a lot. The first mistake that I made on my fitness journey, and this kind of relates to what I was talking about before with watching YouTube workouts, is following influencer workouts. I would go on Instagram or YouTube, watch a random influencer do a workout, and then I would go to the gym the next day or the day of and I would perform that workout, and the cycle would repeat itself. I would be doing different workouts day to day, week to week, and I never really consistently trained the same movements week after week. I think that using influencer workouts to get ideas, to get inspiration for workouts and for what you want to put in your program is awesome. And I still do this, and I put my own workouts on the internet now. So it means that some people might use some of my workouts and use it to inspire them. But at the end of the day, you are not going to be able to progressive overload if every week you are changing your exercise selection. And I know it's confusing because I know a lot of these influencers make it seem like they are doing a different workout every week, but I'm willing to bet money that they're not actually using those as their workouts. They're changing up what they're filming and what they're posting online. But when it comes down to the workouts that they're actually doing for their particular goals, it's not gonna look different every single week. And the reasoning for this is that it's gonna get really boring to watch the same workout every single week on their Instagram or their YouTube channel. So they will change up their workouts for the sake of their viewers, but they're not necessarily doing that for their own actual progress. I did briefly mention progressive overload for a second, and so I want to expand on that a little bit. Progressive overload refers to what we do when we are making the workouts increasingly hard week to week. So say one of the exercises you have programmed in your workout is squats. One week you might be doing a couple of sets of squats for 10 reps at 135 pounds. The next week you want to try to make that a little bit harder by either doing more reps, more sets, or more weight in an effort to make your muscles have to adapt to a harder stimulus. And progressive overload kind of ties into my next point, which is that I never pushed myself hard enough. I would go into the gym, I would go through these different routines, and I would do what felt, kind of hard. It felt like my body was working. If I felt like I wasn't working hard enough, I'd do a superset, or I'd throw in some jumping lunges or something crazy like that in order to make myself feel like I was sweating more, like my heart rate was up more. But ultimately, I wasn't really making the muscle that I was trying to grow work any harder. With progressive overload, we need to be training adequately hard enough in order to properly stimulate whatever muscle we are trying to grow. So a couple measures that we use to indicate how challenging an exercise is or a set is would be ratings like RPE, rating of perceived exertion. That's basically telling you how hard that exercise felt. Or we have RAR, which is how many reps do you have left in the tank by that last rep. A lot of people follow the method of training to complete failure for all of their working sets. I don't think that's necessarily a bad approach, but I do think for some cases, it can be a little too much stimulation and it can be challenging to recover from. Ultimately, what it comes down to is we need to stop paying attention to cardiovascular measures when we're talking about building muscle. So I don't care how high your heart rate is to a certain degree. I don't care how much you're sweating. I don't care how out of breath you are. Obviously, all of those things are going to be influenced by how challenging that particular set is. But more importantly, I want to know how hard it was to move that weight. And so if you feel like you have another 5-10 reps in the tank, you probably are not lifting adequately hard enough. Your last few reps need to feel like an absolute grind. Otherwise, you're basically just doing a bunch of junk volume. Now, before y'all come for me, obviously form is important and form should always come first. But I do think people do have a tendency to be a little bit too perfectionistic about it. I do think having good form integrity is important. Make sure you master bracing. Make sure that you know whether or not your hips are rising too fast in a squat, or any of those small mistakes that can occur that can potentially lead to injury or straining a muscle. But for the most part, your movements do not need to be perfect, but they do need to be well executed before we get to that point where we're really trying to push ourselves. So I do want to say that. I do want to make sure that if you are brand new to this, that you're not trying to go to complete failure on all of your exercises. Start with mastering the form, and then in a couple months when those feel solid, start to up the weight and start to really challenge yourself. Mistake number 3, I let my fear of being bulky hold me back. When you are new to this world, it is very hard to distinguish who is doing this naturally and who is enhanced. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that most bodybuilders are enhanced and all of the top bodybuilders are enhanced. None of them are doing this naturally. So if you're sitting there looking at some of the top bodybuilders and thinking, yeah, I don't know if that's for me. I think they're a little too big for what I want to look like. Unless you slip and choke on some Anavar, it's probably not going to happen. And even for the women who did get there naturally, I promise it would take a lot of time and energy and perfecting your training protocols and perfecting your recovery before you ever even begin to get to the point that they're at when it comes to being really, really swole. Mistake number 4, I want to go back to talking about influencers again, because one of the biggest things that held me back was constantly comparing myself to people I saw on the internet. Every day I was comparing myself to these influencers, these girls on Instagram, without ever realizing that they had a massive genetic advantage on me. Most of the fitness influencers that you see that have massive glutes or just always seem to have abs, they genetically are predisposed to carrying fat in their glutes, not really carrying any fat on their waist, or just having the proportions that they kind of always had: wide hips, larger glutes, and it really didn't take a whole lot of training to get them to this point where they just look absolutely insane. And I just was not built that way. Like I said, I felt like I was built like a wooden door. I carry fat on my waist, I carry fat in my thighs. I just do not have the genetic predisposition to naturally look like I have a tiny waist and wide hips and perfect toned musculature after 6 months of training. It's taken me 9 years just to get to where I am now. So when I stopped comparing myself to the top 1% of influencers that just look fantastic out the gate, and I started comparing my progress to how I performed a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, and tracking my progress for myself, was when I really started feeling that intrinsic motivation. I really felt like I had accomplished something when I wasn't looking at someone who has insane genetic potential and comparing it to my own body. Along the same lines, if you were setting the bar so high that you think that you're going to look like Kim Kardashian next month, you're going to be sorely disappointed. And that is something that I did. I always thought by next month I was going to look like a fitness influencer. I was going to be perfect. I was going to have abs. I was going to have giant glutes. It made me yo-yo between wanting to lose weight and wanting to gain weight. It never led to anything productive. So I learned to set realistic expectations for myself. I learned to look at it from the perspective of, okay, these are the 3 small goals I want to achieve in the next few months, and focus on those things above anything else. I focused on lifestyle factors. I focused on how much weight I'm moving. I stopped being so preoccupied with, well, my glutes haven't grown 6 inches in 3 months. Well, they're probably not going to, again, unless you have insane genetics. it's probably not going to happen. There's a reason these people are influencers. There's a reason everyone follows them. It's because they look insane, but that's not representative of the general population. And we need to be realistic with ourselves before we go beating ourselves up for not looking like that a week later. Anyone who has had a successful fitness journey can tell you that it is a marathon and is not a sprint. Do this to be the best version of yourself, not to try to become somebody else.